The battlefield was quiet. For now, smoke curled into the sky from the distant ruins, and the metallic scent of war lingered in the cold air. Sergeant Daniel Carter sat on a piece of broken armor plating, his breathing heavy but steady. His uniform was torn, his body bruised, but he didn't care. Across from him, sitting on a pile of debris, was Rylak, his alien friend and squadmate. Rylak's smooth blue skin was marked with scratches, and his 4 luminous eyes blinked slowly as he examined the human beside him. "You are injured," Rylak stated, tilting his head. Daniel chuckled, wincing at the movement. "Yeah, well, that's war for you." Rylak remained silent for a moment, then asked, "Do you ever grow tired of it?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his dirt-covered hair. "More than you know." He leaned back, staring at the dull, gray sky. "Sometimes I dream of being back home, on Earth, far away from all this." Rylak's ears twitched with curiosity. "Earth, it is where your kind celebrates the strange tradition called Christmas, correct?" Daniel grinned. "Yeah, that's right. Christmas is special. It's about family, friends, good food, and peace, even if just for a little while." His smile faded slightly. "We give gifts, share stories, decorate trees with lights. It reminds us that no matter how bad things get, there's still something worth fighting for." Rylak seemed fascinated. "Your people celebrate peace even during war?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, it's our way of saying we won't let the darkness take everything from us." He looked at Rylak, an idea forming in his mind. "You know what? When this war is over, I'm taking you to Earth. You'll see Christmas for yourself." Rylak's eyes widened slightly. "You would take me to your home world?" "Of course," Daniel said, clapping a hand on Rylak's shoulder. "You've got to see the snow, the lights, the music, and I'm gonna make sure you try hot chocolate. Best thing in the universe, I swear." Rylak gave a slow nod. "I would. Like that." Daniel grinned. "Then it's a promise." But deep down, neither of them knew how hard that promise would be to keep. The calm before the storm. Hours passed, and the soldiers gathered around a small campfire in the remains of a destroyed outpost. It was one of the rare moments of peace in the middle of a brutal war. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows across their weary faces. "So, Carter," a fellow soldier, Reyes, called out, "you really gonna take your alien buddy home for Christmas?" Daniel smirked. "Dan right. Rylak's never seen Earth, and he deserves a break from all this." The other soldiers chuckled. "Well, if you make it back, have an eggnog for me," Reyes said, stretching. "Assuming we live long enough to see another holiday." Daniel frowned. "Hey, don't talk like that. We'll make it." Before anyone could respond, the radio crackled to life. "All units, enemy movement detected. Prepare for an attack." The firelight dimmed as reality came crashing back. Daniel locked eyes with Rylak. They both knew. The war wasn't done with them yet. And getting home to Christmas just became a lot harder. The peaceful moment around the fire shattered in an instant. The radio crackled with urgency as a panicked voice came through. "All units, enemy forces approaching. Incoming artillery. Brace for impact." Daniel Carter barely had time to react before the ground trembled beneath him. A deafening explosion sent debris flying through the air. The warmth of the fire was replaced by the scorching heat of destruction. The sky, once still and silent, erupted with flashes of energy blasts and roaring gunfire. Daniel hit the ground hard, ears ringing, his vision spinning. Through the smoke and chaos, he could hear the shouts of his squad, the desperate calls for backup, the screams of the wounded. Then he heard Rylak's voice. "Daniel, get up." Daniel groaned, forcing himself to move. His body ached, but he pushed through the pain. He wasn't done. Not yet. Through the smoke, he spotted Rylak crouched behind a destroyed transport vehicle, his weapon raised, firing controlled bursts at the advancing enemy. Their attackers, the Drekker, Ruthless warriors with thick armor and no mercy were closing in fast. Daniel scrambled for cover, grabbing his rifle. "We need to fall back." Rylak nodded. "More of them are coming. The outpost will not hold." As if to confirm his words, another explosion rocked the battlefield, sending a shockwave of fire and metal through the air. Daniel barely had time to react before a massive piece of shrapnel tore through his side. Pain, sharp, burning, unforgiving, ripped through his body. He stumbled, his knees hitting the dirt as he clutched his side. His fingers came away wet with blood. "Daniel." Rylak's voice was filled with panic as he rushed to his friend's side. Daniel gritted his teeth. "I'm fine." He lied. But he wasn't. He could feel it. The cold creeping in, the weakness spreading. This wasn't just a wound. It was fatal. Refusing to fall, Rylak knelt beside him, pressing a hand against the wound in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. "You are not fine. You need medical attention." Daniel coughed, his breath shaky. "No time for that. We need to get out of here." Rylak's 4 eyes flickered with fear. "You are not going to make it if we stay in this fight." Daniel forced a grin despite the pain. "Then let's get out of here." Rylak hesitated for only a second before nodding. He lifted Daniel onto his back, supporting his weight as best as he could. The human grunted in pain, but he refused to cry out. "Command, this is Rylak." The alien shouted into his communicator. "I have a wounded soldier. Request immediate evac." The reply came through, but it wasn't what they wanted to hear. "Negative, Rylak. No transports available. The enemy has air superiority. You're on your own." Rylak's grip on Daniel tightened. "We will find a way." Daniel let out a weak chuckle. "I like the confidence." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. His vision was blurring, his body growing heavier. Every step Rylak took felt like a battle against gravity itself. He wasn't sure how much longer he could hold on. The promise can't be broken. As they moved through the wreckage, gunfire and explosions surrounded them. Rylak fired back when he could, but his priority was Daniel. The human coughed again, his breathing labored. "Hey, Rylak. Do not speak. Conserve your energy." Daniel ignored him. "You remember our deal." Rylak hesitated. "What?" "You, me, Christmas on Earth." Rylak's 4 eyes flickered between confusion and concern. "Yes, but..." "Still happening," Daniel muttered, a weak grin on his face. Rylak felt something deep in his chest, a strange emotion he had never known before. Humans were different. Even on the edge of death, they never stopped fighting. "You will not die," Rylak declared. "I will not allow it." Daniel smirked. "Good plan." But even as he said it, his vision darkened, his grip on reality slipping away. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Rylak's desperate voice calling his name. "Daniel, stay with me." Daniel's world faded in and out, pain anchoring him to reality. But only barely. He could feel the rhythmic jolt of Rylak's movements as the alien carried him through the battlefield, dodging gunfire and explosions. His body was cold, his breath shallow. This was bad. "Hold on, Daniel." Rylak's voice was urgent, but determined. Daniel barely managed a weak chuckle. Trotting. No promises. A Drekar warrior spotted them, raising its plasma rifle. Before it could fire, Rylak spun, his own weapon flashing. The alien soldier fell with a gurgling hiss. The battle still raged around them. The outpost was lost. The Drekar had overwhelmed it. And now, retreat was the only option. A dangerous path. "Command, do you copy?" Rylak shouted into his communicator. "I have Carter. He is wounded, and we need evac." Static. Then a garbled reply. "Rylak, no safe landing zones. Get to extraction point, 10 clicks south." Rylak's ears twitched. 10 kilometers. Carrying an injured human through enemy-infested territory. Impossible. But failure was not an option. He looked down at Daniel, whose breathing was growing fainter. The human was pale, his blood staining Rylak's arms. I made a promise. Gritting his teeth, Rylak adjusted his grip and pressed forward. The chase begins. The moment Rylak moved out of the outpost ruins, enemy forces spotted him. A shriek rang out as a Drekar war horn signaled pursuit. They weren't going to let them escape. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, barely missing as Rylak sprinted into the dense forest beyond the battlefield. The alien moved fast, ducking behind fallen trees, leaping over debris, all while holding Daniel securely. Daniel stirred, blinking up at him. "You, okay?" he rasped. Rylak huffed. "You are dying, and you ask about me." Daniel smirked weakly, just making sure. A plasma bolt struck a tree near them, sending flames into the air. Rylak didn't stop. The cliff's edge. The trees thinned ahead, revealing the deadly problem. A canyon. The extraction point was on the other side, but the bridge had been destroyed in the battle. Rylak skidded to a stop, his heart pounding. Behind him, the Drekar were closing in. No time. Daniel barely opened his eyes. "What's wrong?" Rylak tightened his grip. "Hold on." Daniel blinked. "Wait. What?" And then Rylak jumped. The canyon stretched wide beneath them, the wind howling as they soared through the air. For a split second, Daniel was weightless. Then, impact. Rylak hit the other side hard, rolling to absorb the force. Daniel grunted in pain, but he was still alive. Behind them, the Drekar forces skidded to a stop, unable to cross. Rylak smirked. Not so fast. Reinforcements arrive. A distant roar echoed above them. Engines. Rylak's communicator crackled. "This is Dropship Echo 9. We see you. Hold tight." Rylak's legs trembled as he carried Daniel up a small ridge. A sleek, human military dropship was descending fast. Daniel coughed weakly. "Told you. We'd make it." As the ramp lowered, Rylak rushed inside. The medics swarmed around Daniel, stabilizing him. Rylak slumped against the wall, exhausted. But he wasn't done yet. He looked down at his injured friend and whispered, "I will get you to Earth, Daniel. No matter what." Outside, the battlefield burned. The war was far from over. But for now, they had survived. The hum of the dropship's engines filled the cabin as it soared away from the battlefield. The Drekar forces had been left behind, their furious war cries swallowed by the growing distance. But the danger wasn't over. Daniel was still bleeding out. Rylak crouched beside him, watching as the human medics worked fast, sealing the wound with biofoam and attaching a portable stabilizer. But it wasn't enough. One of the medics, a woman with sharp eyes, glanced at Rylak. "He's in critical condition. We need to get him to a proper medical facility. Now." Rylak's 4 eyes flickered between Daniel's pale face and the medic's grim expression. "How long does he have?" She hesitated. "If we don't get him to surgery within an hour, he won't make it." Rylak clenched his fists. No, he couldn't let this happen. Daniel had made a promise. He had sworn to take Rylak to Earth for Christmas. And humans didn't break promises. Neither did Rylak. Fighting fate. The ship's comms crackled. "This is Echo 9. We're rerouting to the closest fleet hospital. Hold tight." Rylak didn't relax. He knew how human medicine worked. Efficient, advanced. But not always fast enough. Daniel coughed weakly. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Rylak." His voice was barely a whisper. Rylak leaned closer. "I am here, Daniel." Daniel smirked, though it was weak. "Told you. We'd make it." Rylak huffed. "You are not in the clear yet." Daniel blinked slowly, his breath shallow. "I'm fine. Just a scratch." Rylak felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. "Do not lie to me, human." Daniel's smirk faded. his expression turning serious. "Listen, if I don't make it." Rylak grabbed his wrist, his grip firm but careful. "You will make it. I will not let you die." Daniel exhaled softly. "Always so stubborn." Rylak shook his head. "I learned it from you. A race against time." The pilot's voice rang out over the comms. "ETA to the fleet, 20 minutes. Med team, prepare for immediate transfer." Rylak turned to the medic. "Will that be soon enough?" She hesitated. I don't know." That was all Rylak needed to hear. Not good enough. He stood up and stormed toward the cockpit. The pilot, a grizzled veteran, barely had time to react before Rylak loomed over him. "Push the engines to max speed," Rylak demanded. The pilot frowned. "We're already pushing limits. Any more and we risk burning out." "Do it," Rylak growled. His normally calm voice was edged with something unfamiliar. Desperation. The pilot met his gaze, hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Hold on to something." With a flick of switches and a press of buttons, the ship lurched forward, its engines roaring louder. The metal walls trembled from the strain. Back in the med bay, Daniel stirred at the sudden acceleration. "What's happening?" Rylak crouched beside him again. "Getting you there faster." Daniel managed a small chuckle. "Crazy alien." Rylak smirked. "Takes one to know one." Arrival. But not out of danger. The fleet's hospital ship loomed ahead, a massive vessel, bright against the darkness of space. "Docking now," the pilot shouted. The ship jolted as it connected to the docking bay. The moment the ramp lowered, the medical team rushed Daniel onto a floating stretcher. Rylak followed closely, his claws twitching with nervous energy. "Will he live?" Rylak asked, his voice firm but laced with an emotion he couldn't name. The lead surgeon glanced at Daniel's vitals. "We'll do everything we can. But you need to stay here." Rylak watched as they disappeared through the medical bay doors. And then, silence. For the first time, Rylak felt helpless. He had fought battles, survived wars. But now, there was nothing he could do but wait. Wait and hope that his human friend would keep his promise. The waiting was unbearable. Rylak sat in the cold metal hallway outside the medical bay, his claws tapping rhythmically against his armored knee. He had faced war, fire, and death. But this helplessness, was worse than all of it. Inside, Daniel was fighting a battle Rylak couldn't help him win. The door slid open with a soft hiss. A human doctor stepped out, removing her blood-stained gloves. She looked exhausted. Rylak stood immediately. "It's he." She held up a hand. "He's alive, but barely." Rylak's throat tightened. "Alive, but not safe. We stabilized him," she continued. "The plasma wound was severe. If you had arrived even 5 minutes later." She let the words trail off. Rylak swallowed hard. "Can I see him?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He's unconscious, but yes, just don't stress him." Rylak didn't wait. He pushed past her and entered the room. A friend on the edge. Daniel lay on the medical bed, his skin pale, his chest rising and falling in slow, uneven breaths. A monitor beeped softly beside him, tracking his vitals. Too weak, too slow. Rylak pulled a chair beside the bed and sat, watching his human friend. "You still breathe," he murmured. "That is enough. For now." Daniel didn't stir. Rylak exhaled, running a clawed hand over his face. "You are a stubborn fool, Daniel Carter." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You made a promise, remember? Earth, Christmas, snow. I do not understand most of your traditions, but I do know this. Humans do not break their word." The monitor beeped steadily in response. Rylak sat back, folding his arms. "So fight. You survived a battlefield. You survived a Drekkar ambush. You will survive this, too." A long silence filled the room. Then, A twitch. Rylak's eyes snapped to Daniel's hand. His fingers curled slightly. Another twitch. And then a groggy, slurred voice. Rylak. The unbreakable human. Rylak leaned closer. I am here, Daniel. Daniel's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. Then they landed on Rylak. A weak smile tugged at his lips. Still, ugly as ever, he muttered. Rylak let out a short, breathy laugh. And you are still annoying. Daniel winced as he shifted slightly. Hurts like hell. You nearly died. Yeah, figured, Daniel rasped, glancing at the medical equipment around him. Then his eyes met Rylak's again. Did we make it? Rylak's mandibles twitched. Yes, we made it, thanks to your ridiculous refusal to die. Daniel smirked weakly. Dan right. Rylak exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. Do not do that again. Daniel chuckled softly, but the effort made him wince. No promises. Rylak shook his head. Humans. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. When he opened them again, his expression turned serious. Rylak, you still coming with me? Rylak tilted his head. Where? Daniel gave him a tired but firm look. Christmas. Earth. You promised too. Rylak stared at him. Even after all this, after nearly dying, this was what he was worried about. The alien let out a long sigh. I did promise. Daniel's smirk widened. Then pack your bags, big guy. Rylak huffed. Humans. He looked down at his friend. Wounded, weak, but alive. And for the first time since this ordeal began, he allowed himself to believe. Daniel Carter was going to make it. And so was his promise. The medical bay felt too quiet. The beeping monitors, the hum of machinery, none of it drowned out the restless energy in Rylak's mind. Daniel was stable now, recovering in his hospital bed, but the human's insistence had been relentless. You promised, Rylak. We're going to Earth for Christmas. Rylak had tried to argue. Daniel was still too weak. The doctors advised against it. But humans, as he had learned, were stubborn creatures. Now, standing aboard a massive human transport vessel, Rylak watched as Earth grew larger on the view screen, a blue and green jewel floating in the void. First time seeing Earth, a voice asked. Rylak turned to see Captain Harris, the human pilot in charge of their transport. The older man had gray streaks in his hair and a casual confidence that only came from years of space travel. Yes, Rylak admitted. Harris grinned. She's beautiful, isn't she? Rylak studied the planet. It was different from any world he had seen. Not a wasteland of war, not a metropolis of metal, but something alive, vibrant. He nodded. It is unexpected. Harris chuckled. Wait till you see it up close. A stubborn human's victory. The door behind them hissed open. All right, big guy. Did we crash yet? Rylak turned to see Daniel Carter, alive and standing. Barely. The human still looked exhausted, his body weakened from his near-death experience. But there he was, grinning like an idiot, leaning against the doorway for support. You should be resting, Rylak said. Daniel waved him off. I've been resting for days. Had to see this for myself. Rylak narrowed his eyes. If you collapse again, I will throw you back in the medical bay myself. Daniel chuckled. Noted. He turned his gaze to the planet before them. For a moment, he just stared. A slow, contented breath left his lungs. Home, he murmured. Rylak glanced at him. There was something different in Daniel's voice. Something deeper, a kind of warmth, a longing that Rylak had never heard before. Daniel wasn't just seeing a planet. He was seeing everything it meant to him. Family, friends, childhood memories, the promise of safety after war. Rylak had never truly understood what humans fought for, until now. Landing on the cradle of humanity, the descent was smooth. The massive transport ship entered the atmosphere, gliding past drifting clouds and vast oceans. Raylac watched as cities stretched across the land, glowing with millions of lights. He saw mountains capped with snow, forests stretching endlessly, rivers carving their paths through the terrain. For all the power humanity held in the stars, this was where they came from. And now, after everything, so had he. The ship landed at a private spaceport, and as the ramp lowered, the first breath of Earth's air filled Raylac's lungs. It was strange, clean, crisp, unlike any world he had set foot on before. Daniel took a shaky step forward, inhaling deeply. Damn, I missed this. Raylac stepped beside him, glancing at the human. You are home. Daniel smiled. Yeah. And you're officially on Earth, buddy. Raylac nodded. So it seems. Daniel nudged him. Ready for Christmas. Raylac exhaled. I still do not understand what it is. Daniel chuckled. Don't worry, you will. As they stepped onto Earth together, Raylac couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Something bigger than war. Bigger than survival. A new beginning. The air was crisp and cold, biting in a way that Raylac had never experienced before. Snow crunched beneath his heavy boots as he followed Daniel through the quiet suburban streets. Lights, so many lights, glowed in vibrant colors, hanging from rooftops, wrapped around trees, decorating every home they passed. This is excessive, Raylac muttered, his breath forming a small cloud in the cold night air. Daniel laughed, clapping a hand against his armored shoulder. Nah, this is Christmas, my friend. Raylac narrowed his eyes at a large inflatable snowman wobbling in someone's yard. Is this a battle tradition? Daniel chuckled. Nope, just people having fun. Raylac was still trying to process that concept when they reached their destination. A warm, welcoming house with a glowing tree visible through the window. Before Raylac could take in any more, the door swung open. A woman stood there, Daniel's mother. Her eyes widened, first in shock, then in overwhelming relief. Daniel. A second later, she had pulled him into a crushing hug. Raylac took a careful step back. Human mothers were dangerous. Daniel groaned. Mom, ribs, still recovering. She pulled back immediately, holding his face in her hands. Oh my God, you're really here. Daniel smiled. Told you I'd make it. Her eyes shimmered, but then she noticed Raylac. Her expression turned from relief to pure curiosity. And you must be. Raylac straightened. I am Raylac, a soldier of the Drekker Dominion. He paused. And Daniel's friend. A slow smile spread across her face. Well then, Raylac, welcome to our home. Before Raylac could react, she reached up and gently patted his arm. It was an odd gesture. He had faced warlords and assassins, but somehow, this human woman's kindness was more overwhelming than anything. Come in, both of you, she said warmly. It's freezing out here. A holiday unlike any other. Raylac had seen many things in his life. Battlefields, warships, alien worlds. But nothing had prepared him for the chaos of a human Christmas. There were songs, far too cheerful, an enormous decorated tree, for no apparent reason, and more food than any reasonable species could consume in one night. Daniel sat by the fireplace, a blanket draped over his shoulders, drinking something called hot cocoa. Raylac stared suspiciously at his own mug. This is acceptable. Daniel grinned. High praise from you. The night continued with laughter, stories, and traditions Raylac barely understood. But something about it felt right. For the first time in a long time, there was no war, no fear, no loss. Just warmth, just peace. And then, the gift. Daniel's mother handed Raylac a small box wrapped in bright-colored paper. For you, she said. Raylac hesitated. I did not earn this. She smiled. Gifts aren't about earning. They're about giving. Slowly, carefully, Raylac unwrapped the box. Inside was a handcrafted scarf, thick, warm, woven with care. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Daniel smirked. "Looks like you're officially part of the family now." Rilak ran a clawed hand over the soft fabric, something strange tightening in his chest. For years, he had fought for survival, for duty, for war. But here, in this small human home, surrounded by laughter, warmth, and light, he had found something else. Belonging. He looked at Daniel, then at his mother, then at the glowing Christmas tree. Perhaps, against all odds, this was the greatest victory of all.